It's your girl, Natasha Clark. Hey, we are excited about coming to you with our second discussion panelist, Miss Gail Showalter. Welcome, Miss Gail. Good to have you with us. So, hey, you guys, I don't know if you know anything about Miss Gail Showalter. If you're from the Beaumont area, I'm sure you should know Miss Gail. If you do not, here's a little bit about her. So Ms. Gail Showalter holds a master's degree from the University of Texas in curriculum and instruction, and she worked in public education for 20 years. She is a certified professional coach with Fowler International Academy of Professional Coaching. Ms. Showalter is the founder of SMORE for Women. SMORE stands for Single Moms Overjoyed, Rejuvenated, and Empowered for Women, and the author of her book, Living, Learning, Loving, Lessons of Insight and Encouragement on the Path of Motherhood. Ms. Gail is a beloved leader in her community who believes that education is the key to the door that opens a brighter future, you guys, for women, especially single mothers. Again, let's all welcome Ms. Gail Showalter into the discussion panel. Woo! Welcome, 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 Ms. Gail. So, hey, can you tell us a little bit more about what you're doing and what you have going on now and anything you may have planned?
Right now, we're emphasizing education for single moms not because I think everybody ought to go to college. I have 3 grown children and none of them graduated college because we didn't have the funds for that. But besides that, single mothers need a way to stand on their own 2 feet because most of the moms, at least the moms I work with, don't get child support and they're really struggling. And if they had children when they were very young, they didn't have a chance to go to school. So what we do is we come find a mom that is really deserving, really motivated, and has a couple of years that she could finish a degree, whether it's a 2-year degree or she's halfway through another degree, and we help support her to make her have a support system to kind of lift her up and carry her on her way to get her on her feet. That is my main passion right now, and that's what I work on. And so, yeah, I have an online class coming up that will help support that as well.
Wow, wow, wow. So in saying that, let me just say this, that you guys, I was a 16-year-old teenage mother when I had my first child. And Ms. Gail is absolutely right. I did not have the tools that I needed to create a better future for my daughter. And so it took me having to get a whole new mindset and be surrounded with people that could encourage me, not give me a hand out, but to give me a hand up, to help me get on the right path. And also, Ms. Gail, she made an opportunity. There was an opportunity for me to get a grant while I was in school, and Ms. Gail helped me out with that. So thank you for that, Ms. Gail. It's been an honor to know you over the years. It really has. So
that works both ways, Natasha.
Oh, thank you, Ms. Gail. So thank you again for taking your time out of your busy schedule. I know that you're busy to be with us. I am greatly anticipating to hear what you have to say to us concerning our topic for today, parenting during a crisis. So today I want us to have an open conversation about the importance of parenting in the midst of the current crisis in our nation. You guys, this is a new place for most of us. Now, I know that we've had things in our history that has happened that, people have dealt with in America. But for most of us, we have never dealt with this type of crisis. So parenting is going to look totally new for most of us, right? So if you're not familiar with what's going on in our nation, over the last 3-4 months, our nation has been trying to overcome and overcoming, I'm gonna speak that, the COVID-19 pandemic. And now with the civil unrest due to injustice. The pandemic caused school closures across our nation, which led to distance learning in homes. And it has not been an easy task to maneuver for most parents and students, especially since some parents are having to work from home. Imagine that. That creates a whole new environment. So alongside of the distance learning and the pandemic, we are experiencing social unrest due to the brutal murder of a black man by a white police officer. That situation, you guys, was like a straw that broke the camel's back in our nation. And demonstrators are protesting racial injustice for Black people all over the world. And people of all races, which I really love seeing, is I'm loving it. Of all races are beginning to understand just how ugly and dangerous racism and inequality really is. So here's my thought on the matter before I turn this over to Ms. Gail. These are some tough issues and tough times that we're living through. And if we as adults are trying to find our way through the pandemic and the protests of injustices in our nation, it has to be hard for our kids to wrap their minds around all of that. So today we have Ms. Gail, who's going to come on and encourage us as parents to have real conversations with our kids to find out how they're processing what's going on in the world today. Okay, so Miss Gail, are you ready to give us those keys of wisdom?
I'm going to try, Natasha, but you have to know this is a huge, huge topic. And I'm just little old me, we all have our own paradigm. We all have our own filter that we see the world through. I'm an old white woman and probably remember things that most of your listeners tonight weren't even alive when they happened. I lived in the 60s. I remember the unrest that we had over the war in Vietnam. Wow. And where my classmates were going. I remember that. I remember vividly the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. and the reactions that some of my white friends had. I lived through those things. I remember when busing started and we were doing everything we could to integrate the schools, which thank God we did that eventually. But I think when we generalize, that is a not good way to think. Mm-hmm. When I taught school, there were fallacies in thinking that we would talk about, and generalization was one of those faulty ways of reasoning where you just lump people into a group. Mm. And it doesn't matter really what group that is, but and there are other race relation groups other than African American versus white Caucasian. Mm-hmm. There's Hispanics, there's Asians, and surely those don't seem to be as such a hot button topic. Right now, I think we were just sitting on a powder keg. Mm-hmm. I think we're sitting on a powder keg. Everybody had been home. They had been forced to leave their jobs. Masses of people, I don't remember the final numbers of people who had lost their jobs. Mm-hmm. And then you had this instance, terrible murder that we all watched. Mm-hmm. Over and over. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, that just brought, like you said, everything to the surface. It was the straw that broke the camel's back. Right. And so that gave all of these people who were just already upset more to be demonstrating about.
Right. Let me ask you this. So you said that you remember a time as a child yourself seeing all those things happen. How did you mentally process the world around you as a child? Since we're talking about parenting during a crisis, before we even hit on now, I'm curious as to how did you process that as a child? And did your parents or anyone help you to properly process that?
I definitely had the best parents I think you could have during that time. My father was part Irish, okay? The Irish people, of course, y'all won't remember any of this, but way back when in the early 1900s, 1920, and in that time, the Irish were discriminated against. You had signs in the windows, no dogs or Irish allowed. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if that was it, but he raised me from the time I can even remember that racism was a horrible thing. Mm. I was fortunate. See, I was taught that from the time I can remember.
There you go.
That was not the way to be. And I can go through examples. I mean, he had an African man come to work to do something. He had been working with him at the plant. He hired him to do something at the house. And then he had him come sit down and have dinner with us. Mm-hmm. And the man didn't want to come in our house.
Wow.
Because of our neighborhood and the other people in our neighborhood. But for us, it was a witness. This is the way you're supposed to live. Wow. Isn't that what Jesus Christ taught us? He went to every group, everybody the people were prejudiced against the Samaritans. I mean, so yes, I was very fortunate. And then when these things started happening, my family was very upset. There's a fear, I think, that comes into this. I think there's fear all over it from every angle. And we can't deny that. I mean, when I say that, I mean, my dad was fearful that I would get involved in a demonstration, for example. Mm-hmm. And he was just stay away from the demonstrations. I think that was more the war.
I'm sorry. So were you one that was ready to go into the demonstrations and dad was like pulling you back like, no?
I don't think I was too ready, but he definitely didn't want me to be involved in a demonstration.
Okay.
But tell you just how open liberal I was, and I'm not a liberal person, but there was a man in college that I wanted to go out with, and he was Black. This was also when Guess Who's Coming to Dinner came out. Mm-hmm. My parents never went to the movies, but they went to that movie.
Wow.
And, it made a real impression because that's the way they believed. But not everybody I've been associated with believes that way. But the thing that we need is immersion. And by that, I mean, and I wrote something today on my blog, which I can tell you how to get to later. And it's got to start in the crib. It's got to start in the daycare. It's got to start in our church nurseries. You have got to start mixing them and teach them just to be as colorblind as they can. People are God's children, all people. I haven't ever come to grips with understanding all of the history of everything, although I have paid attention to it. But I think, how can people think so poorly and so wrongly in the way that they do? And right now we have the Congress, they're talking to the Congress and they're trying to change the laws and they're trying to change the police departments. That's all well and good, I suppose. Mm-hmm. 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 But you know what? Congress can't fix this. If Congress had been able to fix this, it would have been fixed. They can't. Not Republican or Democrat has ever been able to fix it. And they've tried different things. And surely, I'm not saying that we shouldn't have had the civil rights law. Of course we should.
Right. Yeah.
That's just a no-brainer. Of course we should. Right. But right now, you cannot legislate the heart of people. Right. You cannot legislate attitude. Mm-hmm. People have got to come from the very young, and they've got to start really, really explaining to these young children to have compassion, love, empathy, understanding for one another.
Yes.
I don't see any solution.
So I'm sorry. So so we understand that, we know that there's, like you said, we understand that there's laws that has to be changed to help us further things along. But laws alone being changed is not, like you said, it's not going to help fix the problem. When you said it's the hearts of man, it's the hearts of men. And when you said that, I thought about a Bible scripture, and I was going to try to go to my Bible, but I can't. It says, raise a child up in the way that they should go, and they won't depart from it. And so it all starts in the heart of a child, even as a little bitty kid. What we teach them, what your parents taught you has lived with you over the years. And now, because of what they taught you, you're able to work with a diverse cultures and women, and you just embrace. I love to see you because you embrace Black women, white women, Hispanic, whoever you come in contact with. And I do believe that it's because of how your parents raised you up. They gave you a centered perspective on things, and they didn't limit how you view the world. That's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is, in spite of that, I was in a white school growing up. I was in a white church growing up. I remember getting to be escorted in a wedding by an African American boy, and I was very happy to do so in our all white church because I thought this is an example. Maybe they'll catch on.
Mm-hmm.
But it takes more. It's going to take a lot more than we think it's going to take. I think talking about this is
Mm-hmm.
really good because that's a primary pusher. This morning, I had a lovely conversation with a girl who called me after she heard the radio spot about teaching your children to love one another.
Mm-hmm.
We had a nice conversation. She's an African American girl. She was in tears, and I thought, this is a shame that people have to get to this point, and especially at my age, I had certainly thought we would be past this, but it's taking longer.
Let me ask you this. So how do you think these issues are affecting our kids, like now, present day? How do you think they're affecting them?
Well, I'm not going to beat the same drum over and over, but a lot of it's going to do with how the parents speak about it in their homes, what they say. Children pick up everything. They're going to pick up just exactly whatever the attitude is that the parents have about it.
Mm-hmm.
And if the parents are making awful side remarks or snide, critical, racist remarks, the children are going to pick up on that. I asked one of my children who's got a 12-year-old what he was telling his 12-year-old. And I don't disagree with what he said, but he just said, well, I'm telling him that if everybody would just obey the rules, we'd be all right. Well, that's a simple answer, but of course you have to give a 12-year-old a simple answer. But these are kids, they're in integrated ball teams, they're in integrated camp, Cub Scouts, all these things. So it's that is going to be for the better in the future. The more that you work with each other, the better you will feel comfortable with each other, and those fears that people have will be dissolved, I hope. But I think it's only going to happen when you're working together with people. I mean, I've worked since 2007, just nonstop all the time with single moms, a large percentage of whom are African American women. I get to the point where I don't even think about who's white, who's black. It's just not part of my makeup. Right. But the reason for that is probably because I'm immersed in it, and I went into it feeling that way. Right. I had an opportunity years ago, and I'll get into it just a little bit more about parenting, but years ago I was hired to be a consultant to teach Braille to a girl who was 12 who had lost her sight very quickly to meningitis. So I was invited over to the North Forest Independent School District, which isn't too far from you. It's north of you, northeast Houston. And I wasn't intimidated by the fact that I was the only white person for miles around. And I learned within that culture and that different environment that we all are more alike than different. We're all more alike than different. Right. It was one of the best experiences I had as an educator. So yes, for our children, it's going to be what they see and what they hear. Right. I saw one woman on television during the demonstrations. She had a little girl, really very small, but she had brought her to the demonstrations, and they were interviewing her because she was a white woman with a white child, and she was going to the demonstrations. And she said, I want my daughter to know what this is about. Well, we have to teach our children what it's about. We can't, you see, most of us are very fearful. I'm always afraid I'm going to say the wrong thing. Yeah. And I don't want to hurt anybody. I don't want to offend anybody. I sure don't, pardon me, I don't want to say the wrong thing. But we do have to say something, and I'm glad you're doing this because I think that what we say to the children makes a huge difference. And what they see, I think it's good that the news media are putting out some good stories, some good interactions between white and Black people, because if they don't do that and they just keep showing one side, it's just going to stir up the trouble.
Yeah. And so we have to be able to have these open conversations, or social media will teach our children what it wants them to know. Mm-hmm. So I want to point this out. I want to pull out two little illustrations before we close. My daughter is 12 years old. And when all of this happened with George Floyd, I started not to say nothing to her about it. I didn't even want to have the conversation. Because I didn't want her to get wrapped up in it. However, I knew that she was going to see it somewhere and hear about it. So I knew that I would have to be the one to have that open conversation with her so I can redirect her emotions. And so we had the conversation. I saw, a little bit. We didn't look at the whole video because I can't look at the whole video. But after the fact, you guys, my baby started processing that because she has had some, as a child, 12 years old, she's had some racial slurs thrown at her multiple times. And we've had to try to process that, right? But then again, these are kids. Like you said, kids they do what they learn, what they see. And so anyway, we talked about it and I had to explain things to her, just kind of letting her know, okay, baby, this is what we're dealing with. Right? But I want you to remember this. This is where we've come from. This is where we are now. So we're going somewhere even better. So I don't want her to focus just on George Floyd or all the injustices. I want you to know, okay, this is where we came from. Things were a whole lot worse then, without going there. But we're here now. And even though we have some work to do, we're better, and we're getting somewhere, getting to a better place. So I had that conversation with her, and then all of a sudden I get a text message. You guys, it's a long text message about George Floyd and the injustice, and somebody have to speak up. It's from my daughter. I'm thinking, oh Lord, if she wanted to go to the protest too, and if she won't, I'll take her. But that was her way of expressing how she was processing that. So we have to be able to hear and listen and watch how they're processing this to ensure that that they're processing it correctly. And Ms. Gail, I saw a TikTok about a young lady. She was a white young lady. She was a teenager. And she was hard down crying on this TikTok video because she was upset that her parents was not understanding the pain that she was feeling for the injustices. She was hurt. Like she was devastated that she's trying to, you can hear them going back and forth. She's trying to explain to her dad why this is not right. And dad was kind of like not disagreeing with her, but I think he was over it. Like, you're nagging. But she was hurt. She was legitimately hurt because not only was there an injustice that she didn't agree with, but now it was as if now my family and my parents aren't understanding where I'm coming from. So what do you think would be a great way for parents to have open conversations with their kids? And it could be different on both sides of the spectrum. It could be different for Blacks and it could be different for white people because we're coming from different perspectives. So if you can just touch on that, we have 5 minutes before we close.
Okay, wow. Well, I think parents and communication with their children is an issue that needs to be addressed from young ages as well, because parents, just because they have one nature doesn't mean their children are going to think the same as they think.
That's good.
And we tend to think that our children are going to be like little cookie cutters of us, and they should think like us, and they're going to be like us. And I actually have a little free course online about how to communicate with your child who is different than you.
That's good.
Because we are all different, even parent and children.
That's right.
And it's respecting the difference. So the parents need to let their children talk. They need to let their children talk, and they need to listen.
Yes.
I love the quote that says, being listened to is so powerful that it's as much as like being loved.
Wow.
To be listened to.
Wow.
Because some people can't tell the difference. It's so much like being loved. So parents, listen, you don't have to agree. We're going to be up against an election. We're not all going to agree. Everybody's up in the air about things. There's going to be a lot of tension. Just listen. I'm a big thing about listening.
Wow. I think that is good. I think we can end like that. Just listen. Have ears to hear what your child or your children are saying. And even if you don't agree, just be able to acknowledge where they're coming from. Because if you reject what they're feeling, now their emotions are not only all over the place, but they may be being redirected to a whole, other mindset.
Yes. Yes.
Right. So, Miss Gail, I thank you so much for joining us. We are coming to a close. Can you give any final last thoughts, and then make sure you let us know how we can reach you to stay in contact with you?
Well, I think there's a scripture too about not prodding your children to wrath. That you shouldn't prod in your children to the point where they're angry. Let them be. Listen and let them be. Some children, I'm sure, are frightened. This is frightening. And all that they saw on TV, whichever angle you looked at it, it was frightening. And we may be up against more of that. And so, parents, you do control some things, but you're not going to be able to keep the children off of those phones, off the internet. They're going to see it. So like Natasha said earlier, you're going to have to talk to them about it. But know that we don't want to teach anybody to be a victim. We don't want to teach anybody the victim mentality, especially if you're a believer. You shouldn't be wanting to teach your child to be a victim. And so that's kind of how I would like to end. It's just to ask parents to be open and compassionate with empathy. That's pretty much what I have to say.
All right. So how can we stay in contact you? What is the website to your book, to your products?
Real easy. It's real easy. It's gailshowalter.com, and that's GAIL show SHOWALTER.com.
Okay. And you have another class or course that's coming up, right?
I'm opening it up in a week or two. It's called Are Your Boundaries Protecting You? Ooh. So it's a good one.
Yeah, that sounds good. As a matter of fact, I was talking to a friend of mine, and we touched a little bit on boundaries and the importance of boundaries. So yeah, that's going to be good. So you guys, hey, Ms. Gail, thank you for joining us. I've enjoyed our time together. I enjoyed having these open conversations, no matter how hard they appear to be. So you guys, make sure you stay in contact with Ms. Gail Showalter. Go to gailshowalter.com. Make sure you go check out her book. Just make sure, if nothing else, remember what she said. Listen, have those open conversations with your children, right? Our children are the future, and what we place in them now will determine the future of the United States of America. So, okay. Yeah. Okay, you guys. So, hey, thanks for joining us. Do not miss tomorrow, 12 p.m. We will be wrapping up our Let's Talk discussion panel. We will be with Ms. Dorothy Strohall as we talk about overcoming hopelessness. And I can't wait for that. Thank you for joining us, Ms. Gail.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, ma'am. Good night, you guys.